guys, welcome back to my channel. As you will see, I have had my baby. For those that have been following on, you know I've been pregnant and this little guy turned up just before Christmas, so I thought I'd make a little video for you, as I haven't put a video up for a little while and I'm not sure when I'm going to get to do another video in the near future. So I thought I would put a little video up so that I can introduce you to this little one and to share my labour and birth story. I thought that I would just include that into this video for you. I apologise if the lighting isn't great. I've been trying to record this video all day, and as you know, with newborns things don't always go to plan and you get very little time to yourself, and just when you think you can do something, something happens that stops that and you have to just deal with whatever is happening at the time. And so I'm here now. Hopefully I can get this recorded before we have to go and get our little boy Tommy from nursery, and hopefully this one stays quiet. So I'll try to turn him around for you. He's just fed, but he's a little bit whingy. So he is just about 2.5 weeks old now. He arrived just before Christmas. He was £9.4, which is around 4.2 kilograms. And we measured him ourselves. I don't measure the babies in hospital now in the UK, but we measured him and he was around 54 centimetres long, which was I think the same as Tommy was when he was born. Yeah, he was born just before Christmas. I was induced in the end. That was mainly to do with my age, because I'm now 40, but I was keen to get the baby out. Not only was I very, very uncomfortable by the end of my pregnancy, but I wanted the baby here before Christmas. Didn't want to be in hospital over Christmas, and I wanted to avoid having a baby born maybe Christmas Day, Boxing Day, just because in the future, if we ever want to celebrate the birthday, it's very difficult on those days. It's difficult as it is in December or beginning of January, when there's lots of other things going on, but I wanted the baby to have an opportunity of having the ability to celebrate their birthday without it conflicting with Christmas too much, although it will conflict with Christmas because it is pretty close to Christmas. As you might tell, I have been referring to baby as baby. We have yet to name him. We are very close to naming him, but every time we think we're there, one of us isn't quite sure, and we get 6 weeks to make that decision, and I intend to take as long as I like, whether that is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I will take as long as I like to make that decision, because it's a huge decision to make. He's going to be with that name for the rest of his life, hopefully, unless he decides to change it in the future. So I don't want to make a mistake and then regret it afterwards. So we just want to make sure we've got it right and that it suits him, because we had a name picked out for Tommy when he was, or before he was born, and we were pretty sure we were going to go with that, and he definitely isn't that name. He definitely suits Tommy better, and we didn't have that name until after he was born. So you just have to do what's right. So we're yet to name him. When we do, I will let you know. Either I probably will let you know on here. I might do a what I name my baby video like I did for Tommy a little while back, which I'll link for you if you want to go and watch that. So I'll probably do a little video for you, but I definitely will announce it over on social media, so go follow me there so that you don't miss out on that. Anyway, back to my labour and birth story. So yeah, I was induced. I wasn't induced with Tommy, although I was induced mid-labour because my labour wasn't progressing as it should do. But at that point, when I was induced, I was already on an epidural because I've been in labour for so long. So I was a bit apprehensive about being induced, although it was kind of my own decision to be induced. I was quite happy for that to happen. I went to the hospital for an appointment when I was 40 plus 2 days. 40 weeks plus 2 days. Went to the hospital for an appointment just to kind of discuss my induction, and while I was there they offered me a sweep, which I thought they would do, and so I took that just to see if it would help things move along without having to be kind of induced, or just to help things move along more naturally. After that appointment I was getting some twinges. They said to go home and get on the birth ball, but I was at my mum's house. I was there just because it was a bit easier for getting to the hospital, and Keith had the car, so I didn't have access to going home. well, I could have gone home, but I also had Tommy as well, so we were just staying at my mum's just to make things a bit easier. So I didn't have that available till me, so I didn't have the birth ball available to me till the evening. But I was getting some twinges, and I was very, very uncomfortable down below where they had given me the sweep. So that was really uncomfortable. I was in quite a bit of pain with that. I think just because of how she stretched me, but she did say that I was 4 centimetres already, which was great. They say that once you're having regular contractions and you're 4 centimetres dilated, then you are in active labour. So I was apparently already 4 centimetres dilated, so I just needed to have the contractions to go with that. So nothing really happened. I had a few contractions throughout the evening, but nothing regular, just kind of tightening, and then nothing would happen. So I was going to be induced the following day. Keith went off to work. I didn't want him to miss out on a day's work and start his paternity leave a day earlier than necessary. Obviously, if I'd gone into labour or if things had moved on quicker with my induction, I would have called him up and got him to come to the hospital, but I didn't want him to miss out a day's work if it wasn't necessary. So I went, my mum and her husband came and picked me up, so that we were at her house and she would be looking after Tommy, and we went to the hospital in the afternoon. I obviously said goodbye to Tommy, and then I didn't see him for around 3 or 4 days, which is the longest I've been without seeing him, but he was fantastic. He didn't cry when I left, and apparently he didn't cry at all while I was away. He just would stand at the window saying mummy a couple of times, but the rest of the time he was really good and really brave. So I was really pleased about that, because I was really apprehensive about leaving him. So I went to the hospital. My mum dropped me. Actually, my mum came in with me. She said that she didn't want me to be there by myself, although I was just going to be a lot of waiting around. From what I've heard and what I'd read about inductions, things can just be really slow to begin with. So they talked when I arrived to discuss what was going to happen, just to kind of make me completely clear about the process, and they examined me to see kind of what they thought, whether I was actually 4 centimetres dilated or not. She said that I was a definite 2, but she could definitely stretch me to 4. It was apparently my cervix was very soft, so that is good, because it was already soft, already kind of, as they call it, a favourable cervix, and ready to dilate, so that was great. And then they gave me the pessary, so the gel, and they insert that into your vagina, and then that is given to you to help the cervix soften and hope that it kind of starts to contract, and that just gets you ready for being induced. It means that if they were to go and break your waters or do anything else as part of the induction, that things should hopefully happen more naturally, and it gives it more chance of it actually happening, because there can be failed inductions where it just doesn't happen, your body isn't ready. So they're just trying to make your body as ready as possible for that induction. So that was given to me kind of mid-afternoon, and they said they would come in and examine me again in the late evening, if I remember rightly, and see how far along I was. I had a few contractions throughout that time, but nothing major, nothing regular. So when the new midwife came on, she thought that I would probably need to have another one, and then they would then see what the situation was the following morning. When they came to examine me late evening, around 11:30 p.m, and she basically said that if they needed to give another one, normally they would try and get you to be as active as possible, walking up and down the ward and getting on the birth ball, just to kind of help things move along. But because it was night time, she was aware that I didn't want to be too tired, so she said maybe we'll give it to you and then you can get some rest. and if it hasn't worked, we'll give you another one in the morning, and then you can be as active as possible. But she didn't want me to be extremely tired going into the labour, and I didn't want to either. From my experience with Tommy, it being a really, really long labour, I didn't want that experience of it dragging out days on end, and I've been absolutely shattered. And so that was the plan, that I would probably get some rest, try and get some sleep, and then in the morning really get things moving. She came to examine me and she said that I was ready, and so I didn't need another one, another pessary, so I was ready to go to labour ward as soon as they were ready for me. They were busy at the time, there was no beds available, so I wasn't able to go down right there and then. Had there been a bed available, I could have done, but there wasn't one. She said if I started to get more regular contractions overnight, if there was a bed available in the birth centre, which is a midwife run centre, no doctors, then there was a possibility they could send me there. Normally with inductions they don't, they keep you on the labour ward, but if I kind of went into labour more naturally, then they were happy to send me there because I had no complications with my pregnancy. There was no other reason other than I was being induced to have me on labour ward. So they were happy, if I was happy, to be sent to the birth centre. And I was okay with that, other than the fact that there is limited drugs available. So I was just like a bit apprehensive about how I was going to be, whether I would want an epidural again, because I did have it with Tommy. And I kind of wanted that available in some ways, even if I didn't take it, just to know that I could have it without making a bit of a fuss and being moved over to labour ward. Anyway, my contractions didn't start, so I wasn't taken over to the birth centre. At around 6:30 AM they came to me and said there was backing up actually overnight. I did try to get some rest. They said get some sleep, we'll get you down to labour ward if we don't send you down to the birth centre. And so I did try to get some rest. I tried to lay it on my left side because apparently that helps to try and get the baby into the right position, because one of the midwives suggested that the baby was back to back, and I'd had that experience with Tommy, and I wanted to avoid that as much as possible, because after all was said and done I ended up with forceps because they couldn't get the baby out. So I was trying to avoid that as much as possible. So I laid on my left side and the baby was going absolutely crazy. Just, there's such strong movements. They were so painful. I was getting contractions as well, but it was just the movements that were so painful. So Keith went and got a midwife and she got me some paracetamol so I could try and get a bit of rest, because there weren't really contractions. I was just so uncomfortable with the baby's movements. I can't remember if I moved onto my right side or not, or whether I went onto my back, because obviously the hospital beds are more elevated, so you can lay on your back if you need to. I may have done that just to ease the kind of movements of the baby. He's got hiccups now. Oh dear. So in the end I was able to get a little bit of rest that night. Not a lot, but just a little bit, enough I guess to get me through. And they came and got me at around 6:30 AM to say that there was a bed available on the labour ward. So I was to kind of gather my things together and go down there. I walked down there. I wasn't really having a lot of contractions. I was fine to walk down there, and I thought it'd probably help things move along if I did walk down there, you know, keeping active and everything. So I went into the room, got set up, and some of the rest of it is a little bit of a blur. I don't remember the times, and as the end of my labour came, I was on gas and air. So I can kind of remember things that had happened, but I was kind of so high on the gas and air that a lot of it is quite vague, and I only remember little bits. So I was doing my best to tell you what happened and kind of the time frame, but I'm not 100% sure on the time frame, and I don't have any notes in front of me. They don't give you the notes of what's happened, so I can only go on what I remember and what Keith's told me. So they took me down to the labour ward, and I don't remember, I think they might have examined me first, got me all set up, and these things always take a while. You know, you're not straight in, get it sorted. it always takes a bit of time. They probably examined me, and then eventually they broke my waters, and they said, we'll come and examine you in 4 hours to see how far along you are. She said I was 4 centimetres dilated, but the baby's head was quite low down, so that was good. So yes, so she said that she'd come and examine me in 4 hours to see how far along I am, and at that point they'd make a decision whether to keep going the natural way, so just letting my labour progress naturally, or whether to put me on the drip, which kind of induces the labour further, just to encourage those contractions. She said that she could examine me in 2 hours if I wanted to, but I think if they did, they'd have to make a decision there and then, or whether to induce me further. And so it's best to let things happen more naturally. That's why they would leave me 4 hours. But I could make that decision at the time, and so she would come back to me after 2 hours and see where I felt I was, and whether I felt like it was worth being examined. I can't remember what time my waters were broken, but I do remember that not a lot of water came out. So then I panicked that I had this huge baby. I had a big baby, but not as big as I was thinking, because with Tommy there was a lot of water. Even though there was a big baby, there was a lot of water. And I kept saying to the midwife that there was a lot of water when he was when I was in labour with Tommy, and when she broke my waters there wasn't a whole lot, so there was just a little trickle. Later on, as my contractions got stronger, there was a lot more water, and then the midwife did make comment on the fact that this is what you were talking about, because there was a lot more coming out, but at the time there wasn't a whole lot. So she brought my waters, and she just said, right, you need to be as active as possible. You know, you can walk up and down the corridor, or you can go and get a drink in the cafe, or you can bounce on the birth ball, whatever, to try and get things moving along as quickly as possible, or just to help things progress more naturally. I just spent most of the time on the birth ball, just trying to bounce and help things move along. I was starting to get a few contractions. They were not that close together, and they weren't extremely strong, but they were definitely starting to become stronger and more regular. Eventually I decided I should probably start to time those contractions. I'm just going to grab I'll just grab my phone, because we started to time the contractions. I just want to see what time that was that we started to time them, because they were starting to get stronger, and I thought it was probably a good time to start to time them, because then it's a good indication of how far apart they are and how strong they are, or how long they were lasting, should I say. But that was at 9:30 AM that we decided to start timing the contractions. So I was having contractions before that. It was at that point that we decided to start timing them, and they were around a minute long and around 5 to 6 minutes apart, so they weren't really close together, but they were starting to become more close together. So that was 9:30 AM. I'm not sure how long after that had my waters broken that happened, maybe an hour afterwards, something like that. That went on for about half an hour, and then they started to get closer together, about 3 minutes apart, and starting to get stronger. And I'm not sure what time it was, but I decided that the midwife kept saying, do you want gas and air? And I decided that maybe I would benefit from having it, but because I was on a labour ward and being induced, I then had to be monitored. So that meant laying on the bed and having the baby monitored, having my contractions monitored as well, just to make sure things were moving along and everything was fine. So once the contractions started to get a bit stronger, I did get up onto the bed, and then had all the kind of equipment attached to me to monitor the baby's heartbeat and monitor my contractions. Oh, it's okay. Shh. And then shortly after that, they decided that they wanted to put a little clip on the baby's head. It's just to help monitor the baby's heart rate better, because because he kept moving, they kept losing his heartbeat. So just an easier way of monitoring the baby's heart rate. So they did that, and so because of that, they decided to examine me as well at the same time, which they weren't going to do. And that must have been around 2 hours after being having my waters broken. And she said I was still only 4 centimetres dilated, but the head was extremely tight down into my cervix. So she couldn't stretch any further than 4 centimetres, but it was so tight down. It's okay, shh. That it was a good thing, because it was so far down. Hey, shh. He's getting a bit fidgety now. Shh, shh, shh. So she said that she would come and check me again. I can't remember if she said 2 hours or 4 hours. It might have been 2 hours. Just to see how things were progressing. And she was happy to leave me with having contractions, because the contractions were coming quite thick at that point, and close together. So she was happy to leave things as they were, rather than trying to induce me further with a drip, because then the contractions can become quite intense if you do that. Hey. So then it wasn't long after that, and my contractions were getting really strong. Then all of a sudden, hey, shh. Then all of a sudden, my contractions went absolutely crazy. Like, they're so strong, and I just got the urge that I needed to push. And all I could think of at that point was, they cannot leave me for 4 hours or 2 hours, however long it was, like this. I can't do it. I was having the gas and air at this point, and I think I'd asked for some paracetamol or maybe some other stronger painkillers, but they didn't get them to me before the contractions went crazy. And I said to Keith, I can't do this, I need something stronger. And all I kept thinking is, you've got to take this pain away from me. It was just too strong, the pain, and there's no way I could cope with this pain for half an hour, never mind 2 hours, 3 hours or 4 hours. It's just no way. I'd given up. I couldn't cope. There was absolutely no way I was going to be able to deal with that. And I probably screamed that I need something stronger. I was having gas and air, in between me trying to chomp on the bit that you put in your mouth for having the gas and air. I was just like, I need something stronger. I do remember the student midwife going and getting a plastic apron to put on, and I didn't know why she was doing that. I just noticed her doing it, and I just didn't really think much of it. Now I realise she'd realised that I was really close to delivery, and she was preparing herself for delivery. I just didn't know it at the time. All I kept thinking was, I can't cope. There's absolutely no way I can cope with this amount of pain for all that time. So all this time I'd only had a gas and air, hadn't had any other pain relief other than the paracetamol I'd had overnight, but that was no longer in my system. I was just having the gas and air. And there was a few times when I thought, I wonder how far I'll go before I cave and want an epidural. Because I'd had the experience of having an epidural, and just, although it didn't end particularly well with Tommy, in the sense that I'd had to have forceps and an episiotomy, and obviously the pain of that afterwards, the actual labour, I just didn't experience it. I didn't have to deal with the pain. So I wondered how far I would be able to go without saying I need an epidural or want an epidural. But I was coping just about, so I just kind of dealt with the pain, and then all of a sudden I was like, I need something stronger. You've got to give me something stronger. So the midwife came in and she said, I'll examine you. If you're not ready to deliver, would you like pethidine? And I'm like, in between me not really being there, as in I was on gas and air, and I was a little bit, I could hear what she was saying, but I wasn't able to focus fully on what she was saying. But I heard what she said, I kind of just nodded, yes, give me whatever, kind of thing. She examined me and she said, you're ready. Thank goodness for that. So I'd gone from being 4 centimetres with the head really low down to fully dilated within about 30 minutes, maybe slightly longer. It wasn't long at all. There was hardly any time in that time frame at all, and I didn't have the drip to induce my labour. So it was not that I'd kind of had the drip to induce it quicker. All that had happened was I'd had my waters broken, and the contractions just came really, really fast, and I dilated really, really fast, which is the complete opposite to what happened with Tommy, because I was in labour for a very long time and wasn't dilating. So because of that, I just thought, I can't cope for all this time if this is going to go on for hours on end. So when she said to me, "You're ready to deliver," even though the pain was horrendous, I could kind of cope. I could talk myself into dealing with what was going on because I could see the end was in sight. I didn't know how long that would be. Some people have 2 contractions and the baby's out. Others push for an hour or even 2 hours before the baby is delivered. So it was just a case of, I didn't know how long it was going to be, but at least they were saying I could push, and the baby would hopefully be delivered fairly soon. A lot of what's happened after that is very, very vague. So before this point, when I was having the gas and air, I would kind of limit myself. So I would take it until I started to feel dizzy, or kind of my lips started to feel kind of tingly. I would then stop taking the gas and air because I could probably cope with the contraction, and then I'd take it again once the next contraction came, and I'd come around a bit more. But once the contractions were coming so fast, I just bless you. There was no gaps really in the gas, and I just took it as and when I needed it. So a little bit is vague of what happened afterwards, after this point. But they were telling me I could push, obviously, really just to keep pushing through the contraction. But at one point, I do remember them saying to press the red button, I guess. But not to worry, it wasn't an emergency. They just wanted someone to come in. I think I was probably struggling to get the baby out as quick as they were hoping. I'm not too sure. They didn't really say a whole lot. Anyway, after, I don't know how many contractions it took to deliver him, but I could feel that the heads had been delivered, which is something I'd never experienced my last labour with Tommy. So I remember the feeling of that, kind of the relief that the head had been delivered, and then it was 1 or 2 contractions and the rest of the body was delivered, and they put him up onto me. Completely different experience to last time. It was such a fast labour, such a fast birth. Afterwards I kept thinking that was horrendous, but in some ways it was good because it was so fast. The time after the delivery was a lot longer than the actual birth and labour, because they were struggling to stitch me up. I was losing a lot of blood, clotting a lot, so again, a lot of it's very vague of what happened, but they were having to push down on my belly to get rid of the clots, and that really hurt. And just a lot of blood was coming out, and they were struggling to stitch me up. I had a 2nd degree tear, but it was a bit of an awkward shape, and because I was bleeding so much, she was struggling to stitch me up, but she managed to eventually, after a lot of trying to contract my stomach or my uterus to get rid of the blood and the clots. They had to put a cannula in my hand. They failed the first time, so I had to have it in the second time. It was really high up. It was kind of up here, whereas normally you have it midway down your hand. So they had to put it up there. I'm not too sure why. Maybe my vein kind of had disappeared on me. And the midwife said, "It's a shame you nearly got away without having a cannula in, but because of all the blood loss, she had to put one in." And that was because they needed to put me on a drip to help contract my uterus further, and I was on that for 4 hours. And they managed to get rid of the clots from my uterus, which was good. And after that that was fine. It was a lot of blood loss. I was very faint afterwards. I tried to have a shower after the 4 hours were up when I was on the drip, but I nearly fainted. I got to the door of the bathroom and I had to stop because I was going to fall. I'm going to try and finish this video off really quickly because my battery is flashing at me. But I didn't faint. I didn't lose too much blood. They didn't have to give me a blood transfusion. I was just on iron tablets. I had to stay in one night just so they could do all my bloods to make sure that I was fine and I hadn't lost too much. But they got my iron levels and said that iron tablets were enough, which was great. I didn't have to have a blood transfusion and I was able to go home. I'm going to quickly finish this video because my battery is flashing at me and this one needs a nappy change and we need to go out to go and get Tommy. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm sorry if it's a bit tickledy-pickledy. I only remember little bits of my labour and birth, but it's amazing that I was able to do it just on gas and air. I can't believe that I did. Right, I'm going to finish this video because my battery just keeps dying on me, and we need to get going. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and I will see you in my next video. Hopefully I'll get some more videos up. I plan to do a postpartum video, but I haven't got around to doing it today and I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but I will try and get one done because there's a few things happened since delivery that I'd love to share with you guys. Anyway, hopefully see you in my next one. Bye. Say bye bye.